Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the hottest Kickstarter on the internet. I am speaking, of course, of Brandon Sanderson's surprise novel project. As of this recording, Sanderson has raised almost $25 million on this Kickstarter from nearly 105,000 backers. As I said in my previous video, these are some really amazing numbers. Sanderson has accomplished something really special here. He has offered what I refer to as the Sanderson subscription model to people who are very invested in his fictional worlds and given them the opportunity to sign up to receive not one, not two, not three, but 4 books from him in the year 2023. That is a pretty powerful promise to make, and people have responded with corresponding enthusiasm. It's really fun to see authors connect with their audiences like this, and it's pretty impressive to watch those numbers go up, too, not gonna lie. Now, this is not all sunshine and roses. There are a lot of people that are really upset that Sanderson has managed to find this level of success on Kickstarter. I have to admit, there's a weird kind of territorial nature to people on Kickstarter. They seem to think that this is a private playground, and people who show up with really cool new toys should not be allowed in until they somehow pay their dues. This mindset has more to do with Kickstarter users than Kickstarter itself. Let me make that clear. Kickstarter seems to be entirely happy to have these big, large number projects showing up. Of course, that makes sense. It brings a lot of attention to the Kickstarter brand, and it promises them more large number campaigns in the future. The primary complaint that you are hearing from most people is that Sanderson is sucking up a lot of money that could go to other creators. This is a complaint that you will hear a lot whenever a big name gets something really successful on Kickstarter. And I want to break it down and examine it from a couple of different directions. First of all, the claim that Sanderson is sucking up a lot of money is an interesting one. Yes, his Kickstarter is getting $25 million at a bare minimum, probably closer to 40 when everything is said and done. But keep in mind that he is not selling just one story. As I said before, he is selling 4 of them. Looked at that way, you could say that each book is only raising about $8.5 to $9 million right now, and probably $10 million by the end of the campaign. That is still quite a lot of money, but it's not out of line for previous Dragonsteel Kickstarters, or I should say Kickstarter. The premium leatherbound Kickstarter they did for the Way of Kings 10th anniversary release was about $6 million, and that was a re-release in a premium leatherbound format, so it's very different from the first release of a new novel by a popular author. Since this is probably going to be the only way to get these books for the next 5 years, $8 million for a book over a period of about 5 years is pretty reasonable for a well-known author. That's about $1.25 million per book per year. Let's look at it from another angle. The average backer to Sanderson's campaign has pledged about $240 to the campaign. That's about $60 per hardbound book, which is a pretty reasonable cost when you consider that this is both the book and the shipping charges rolled together. There are some factors skewing these numbers in one direction or another. For example, you can just buy all 4 books as ebooks for $40. That's $10 per book, which is a pretty typical price for a big name published ebook. There are other backer tiers that allow people to get swag boxes. We don't know exactly what is coming in those, but they are going to come every month, and they will include some kind of collectible memorabilia relating to parts of Sanderson's storytelling universe. Pretty good stuff if you're really deeply into that kind of storytelling. I think that in general, however, these tiers are outliers, both at the high and the low end. Because if you look at the tier that gets you the 4 hardbound unsigned books, it costs $220, which is $55 per book. And if you estimate, say, $40 for the actual book itself and another $15 for shipping, a price of $55 is pretty reasonable. As a reminder, Sanderson and his company are going to be solely responsible for the costs of printing and shipping these novels. That is going to come out of their final total. So he is not getting $25 million of pure profit. A lot of that money is going to go back into the campaign, and some people have speculated that it may actually run a loss when everything is said and done. I don't think that's likely given the economies of scale he's going to be able to generate for this campaign. However, I am not an expert on this kind of publishing. I have frankly never done anything remotely like this or even looked into it. I have only looked into things on a much smaller scale. Of course, Sanderson has an existing company with 6 other employees that can help him handle a lot of this work, and having all of that infrastructure already in place is definitely a point in his favor. He's probably going to be able to handle this and tidy a hefty profit of probably, I would say, $5 to $8 million when this is all said and done. But I think that the actual profit on this campaign that Sanderson can expect to make is much smaller than a lot of people think it's actually going to be. This is especially true if we remain in the economic climate we are currently in, where shipping and printing prices have been skyrocketing for the last couple of years. So ultimately, I don't think Sanderson is getting any more or less money from this method of funding his novels than he would if he took them to a publisher and they agreed to publish them, as I believe they undoubtedly would, because he's Brandon Sanderson, and he obviously has a large and enthusiastic fan base looking to buy his stories. Another aspect I think people are missing is that by funding these 4 stories in the way he is, Sanderson is actually clearing out a lot of space for other authors to get their names out there. What do I mean by that? I mean that publishing houses tend to launch media blitzes whenever they put out a new novel by a big-name author like Sanderson. If Brandon were to sit down and revise these novels and then publish them in addition to the novels he is already under contract for over the next year or 2 years or maybe even 3 years, he would substantially increase the number of press offensives that his publishers are putting out. This would drown out a lot of the other parts of the science fiction and fantasy conversation because so many people are busy talking about all of these Sanderson novels coming out. And believe me, they would be talking about this. Not to the extent that they are currently talking about what Sanderson is doing right now, but it would still be a dull background roar spread out over a course of 2 to 3 years, which is about how long I think it would take a traditional publisher to put out 4 extra novels in their release cycle. That is a lot of extra noise in the media environment that new authors or even small name authors would have to compete against in order to get their product out before audiences. Yes, Brandon Sanderson has quote-unquote broken the internet with his Kickstarter and its amazing numbers. However, breaking the internet is a flash in the pan. The internet is very resilient, and it usually restores itself to a right orientation after about 2 weeks, a month at most. There are a handful of people who probably had releases in this 2-week to 1 month window who I can understand being very upset that their new book coming out got completely blanketed by wall-to-wall coverage of Brandon Sanderson's crazy, insane new Kickstarter. That sucks. That's also the way life works sometimes. Sometimes there's just a bigger guy doing something alongside you, and you have to work in his shadow for a little bit. But on the whole, I think Sanderson's method here is actually leaving a lot of room for small name voices to really make themselves heard rather than have to constantly compete against the press releases and the hype men for an entire quartet of stories that nobody was expecting. And on the balance of things, I think this is healthy. I think this is a very fair play by Brandon. He's ultimately going to be eating up a lot less space in the attention economy than he would have been otherwise. And of course, the last possible critique of Brandon here is that he just shouldn't have taken so much money that could have gone to other authors. People have limited dollars, and they can't spend them everywhere. And I get that. I've already talked about this kind of critique at length, ironically enough, when I talked about Matt Walsh's quote-unquote children's book that he put out about 4 or 5 months ago. Now, this is not the identical situation as that. Matt Walsh is not really a writer, although he is a child, and his story was less about entertainment and more of a modern-day parable, the moral of which many people strenuously disagreed with. However, the primary thrust of the criticism coming from other writers was just that he was eating up a lot of quote-unquote space or money that could have been devoted to other works of better artistic merit. While I think a lot of people would argue whether or not you can say another writer can rightfully claim to have more artistic merit than Brandon Sanderson, my response to that critique of Sanderson is the same as it was when I responded to that critique of Matt Walsh. Sanderson is getting this kind of support because he has already built an audience that knows what they're going to get and wants to get more of it. You can't just transfer that kind of interest to another author. People's interests in storytelling and fiction are not plug and play. They find what they like, and that's what they read. I don't really feel that I have to expand on that rebuttal too much more in this video. If you're interested in hearing more on it, I've linked my video on Matt Walsh down in the video description. If you want more of my commentary on why you cannot transfer an audience from one writer to another, there it is. In the meantime, what else is there to say about these kind of critiques other than stay salty? Sanderson is going to do well, and I think he should be praised for that. He has shown us a very interesting new business model, and he has done very well with it. Other people will now try and mimic that business model, no doubt, although it's going to be difficult for a lot of people who don't have Sanderson's visibility. I think ultimately that kind of business model has a lot of promise going forward, and I'm glad to have seen it. This is a very interesting concept, and I feel like I've gotten my money's worth just seeing it play out. In the meantime, that's all I've got for you today. Let me know what you think down in the comments down below. There's a like button and a subscribe button there. You can use those as you see fit, and I will talk to you later.